The charters of corporations that routinely violate health, safety, environmental protection, and worker safety laws. In 2004, he was the Green Party candidate for President of the United States, and tonight he is here as one of the national spokespeople for Move to Amend. So without further ado, please welcome David Cobb.
I want to honor the fact that we're in a Grange hall, y'all. And in order to, the reality is that being in a Grange hall makes this a special thing because it roots us and ties us to a historic legacy of the people fighting back against corporate power. And so before I get underway, I actually want to bring Lawrence up, who's the vice president, not the Grange master, but the vice president of this Grange hall.
Thank you. I want to take just a moment to welcome you to the Grange Hall. This hall was down to about 4 members a few years ago, and through talking about issues like this, look what we can create. The hall's been completely redone inside here. So I'm Lawrence, and this Grange organization has been in Sebastopol since 1870. And it has been fighting for local food and community resiliency ever since then. So I was reading some history because Grange is old. And so you lay down at night and you think, I want to look at something. And I went to archive.org and I looked at the 1904 Pennsylvania State Grange newspaper this week. The first issue, the one where they say, we are going to make a newspaper, and this is why. And the first article with the biggest headline on the first issue of the 1904 Grange newspaper in Pennsylvania was, shall this country be for the people or for the corporation? And it went on to say, why is it every time Wall Street goes bankrupt, we have to bail them out? That's over 109 years ago. So we focus on this kind of stuff here, getting together, education, and politics. We don't endorse candidates, but we educate on issues. And how can you participate? I'm so glad you want to know. First of all, bring us your events. We are a community who has been gifted this hall by the people who came before us, and therefore our rental rate is very straightforward. The greater the good, the lower the price. All right, we're co-sponsoring, so you know how that goes. Also, I just want to point out tomorrow night we have music. We have Tish Hinojosa from Texas. This room will be filled with beautiful music. It'll be a whole other vibe. And then on Saturday, it's a community craft fair, so that your gifts don't come from Sacramento or Shanghai, they come from your neighbor. And lastly, if you're intrigued, it doesn't cost much to be a member of the Grange, and it sure is fun. I invite you to join, and I have some membership applications. Our next meeting is Tuesday the 26th, the last Tuesday of the month. So, in conclusion, welcome to the Sebastopol Grange.
My grandfather was a Baptist preacher, so my voice tends to project, but we got a full hall here. So I think I am going to go ahead and use this microphone, but I do get kind of animated sometimes. So is this a good, are we okay here? Are we all right? Good. Because as Amy said, my name is David Cobb. I like to think of myself as a proud, a patriotic, and these days a pretty pissed off American citizen. Yeah? Okay, good. I'm in the right place. And I also want to admit something, friends. I also am a sad American because I can remember a time in my life that I could say I was proud and patriotic and I didn't need any other qualifier. And for me personally, that's when I was a little boy. When I was taught that I was from the United States of America. And the United States of America, I was taught, stood for liberty and justice and equality. And I was so proud of that. But even deeper, I was taught that the United States of America was like some great shining light on the hill. And we would guarantee liberty, justice, and equality to the entire world. I was so happy. I was so proud. And I'm angry because I grew up to realize I had been lied to. But you know what? That's a harsh word, lied to. So instead I'll say, I grew up to realize that I had been subjected to a creation myth. And I want to use that word because, see, I can remember the person that I most closely associate that story with. And her name was Mrs. Armstrong. She was my 5th grade teacher. Are there any current, future, or former teachers in this crowd? Raise your hand. Here, get your hand up. That's one. Let's get a round of applause for our teachers. A round of applause for teachers, because you know what? We don't thank teachers often enough in this society. We damn sure don't pay them enough money. But the more important reason I ask for that round of applause is in honor of Mrs. Armstrong. See, Mrs. Armstrong didn't go to bed at night saying, I can't wait till these children come into my classroom. I'm going to fill their minds full of lies and propaganda. And their little dogs too. No. Mrs. Armstrong was a public teacher, and like every public teacher, she wanted to create, encourage, cultivate productive members of society. She wanted to help children know their place. See, Mrs. Armstrong taught that creation myth because she believed it. And it worked on me, it worked on my classmates, and that creation myth worked on most of you because I can see how you're reacting to me. See, it works on us because we want to believe it. We want to live in liberty, justice, and equality. I'm going to do you one better. We deserve it. It's our birthright. And yes, American children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And you know what? It's not because they're American children. It's because they're human beings. Right? Because I'm challenging you, I'm challenging myself to recognize that this lie that we were taught about American exceptionalism is a lie. However, liberty, justice, and equality are uplifting experiences because they are human values. And yes, American children want and deserve liberty, justice, and equality. And so do Iraqi children, and Afghan children, and Israeli children, and Palestinian children, and Mexican children. See, the point I'm making is, if we're going to actually take ourselves and this moment in world history seriously, we're going to have to come to understand now is the time to build a worldwide, global movement for peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. Now is the time. That I don't need to convince y'all that we need to do those things, right? I mean, the fact that you are here and we packed this Grange hall, like, you have come here and voluntarily chosen to do so. So I reckon that you already agree with me that these things need to be done. So I don't need to convince you, but I do think I need to be persuasive, to persuade you that Move to Amend has a plan. And so, because I want to be persuasive, I want to share with you something that I learned intuitively as a successful trial lawyer, and now scientists are proving beyond a shadow of a doubt. And that's this. If you want to be persuasive, facts don't really matter too much. Let that sink in for a minute, right? But the first time I heard it said that way, I thought, oh no, this is terrible. Like many of you, I've spent a lot of time learning facts. Right? And we kind of have this idea that if we can just learn how to present facts logically and cogently, everybody will see what we see, and the world will just magically change. Then I came across the work of a cognitive scientist named George Lakoff. Some of you know this name. George Lakoff has proven through the study of the structure of the human brain and how we process information. And Lakoff says it simply in a way that when you think of it, it just makes sense. None of us are just little computers going around collecting data, running algorithms, and then spitting out that. Maybe the engineers in the crowd. But most of us, right, we don't make sense of the world that way. Lakoff says we make sense of the world through the stories we tell each other. And the stories that are told over and over again become the narrative or the frame by which we see the world. And what Lakoff says is, if you're going to present new facts to anybody, you damn sure better present it in a way that makes sense to them in light of their existing story or frame. So since I want to be persuasive, and I know that human beings understand the world through stories, friends, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that these huge transnational corporations are not just exercising power. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that these huge transnational corporations are ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling in this country. Because after all, they're making the decisions. Corporate CEOs already decided how much poison is going to be in the water that we're all drinking. Corporate CEOs have decided how much poison could be in the air we're breathing right now. Corporate CEOs are deciding whether you get health care or not. Corporate CEOs are deciding energy policy in this country. Corporate CEOs decided to take this country into war. And we, the people, we get to choose between Coke or Pepsi. We can choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store checkout line. We can have 17 different types of toothpaste to choose from. You think I'm making that up? Go to the department store. Next time you're there, go down that aisle and count them up. See what you don't get 17 different flavors. Think of me when you do it. I'm just pointing out, friends, that we are inundated with consumer choices. Oh, provided you have the money to pay. Let's just take a moment to recognize something, that in this capitalist society, your human needs don't matter at all. It's only a question of whether you can afford to pay. But even if you can afford to pay, even if you can afford to make a consumer choice, let's acknowledge that being presented with a preordained consumer choice is not the same thing as political power.
That's right.
Right? Political power would be the opportunity to participate in a meaningful way in the public policy decisions that affect our lives. And saying it that way, I hope it's obvious we don't have that power. And I told you I'm going to tell a story, and as I tell this story, I'm going to challenge you to challenge me to ask yourself, is this a story that only liberals or progressives can hear or appreciate? Or has Move to Amend figured out a way to tell a story that cuts across party labels, that's cutting across party affiliations, that's actually getting deep to the human experience and is part of the narrative that virtually every American can see themselves in? And as I tell this story, I'm going to make sure that we cover 4 topics together. The first topic that we're going to cover is the word democracy. Now that word gets tossed around a lot, friends, so let's make sure we've got some common agreement. From what language does the word democracy derive? Greek. Demos means the people. Kratia means rule. So literally, Attic Greek translated, the word democracy means the people rule. Pop quiz. How many of y'all believe we the people are ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. Look around. Look around. We are smack dab full in this hall, and not a single hand went up. I ask this question everywhere I go. I will have done this presentation over 175 times this year by the end of this tour. I ask that question everywhere. Sometimes I do 2 or even 3 presentations a day. I ask it everywhere I go. Almost nobody raises their hands. And that, my friends, is a problem. But saying it another way, I think it's a good thing. What? Oh no. It's not a good thing that we the people don't rule. I think it's a good thing that people are not raising their hands to that question anymore. I think it's a good thing that we are finally being honest enough and courageous enough to confront a hard, sobering reality that we do not have and never have had a functioning democracy in the United States of America. And that is, right? And honestly, for most of us, and I'll just speak for myself as a white man, that was a hard thing for me to finally come to. It really was, because I believed it so much, right? But I'll tell you, it is liberating to tell the truth, right? And it has become liberating for me to actually be willing to confront that reality. And if the word democracy means the people rule from Attic Greek, then maybe we should actually call this what it really is in Attic Greek, a plutocracy. The rule by a wealthy elite. And maybe if we're going to really get down to it, let's make up the right word and call it a kleptocracy. The rule by a thieving wealthy elite. Because they are actually stealing from us, and friends, they are stealing our labor, they are stealing our resources, they are stealing our future, and they are stealing our children and our grandchildren's future, and the question is, are we going to let them keep doing it? That's where I think we are. And I'm going to go now to the next topic, which is sovereignty. Friends, if I just had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think of? Quick, the sovereign. King. I bet everybody here immediately thought king. That's because the word sovereignty literally means the authority to rule. And 500 years ago, the sovereign was the king. The king was the sovereign. Those words were literally synonymous. And where did the king claim his authority to rule? God. You don't get more legitimate. Right? That's a big deal. To illustrate what I mean by this, we're going to do a quick little exercise together. This exercise is always a lot of fun. For me. I'll show you. I'll ask those assembled in this Grange Hall who are willing to do it to close your eyes and repeat after me. David Cobb is the king. I told y'all this was fun for me. Let's do another one because David is God's representative on earth. Ready? All right, how about this last one? And therefore, anything David tells me to do, I will obey without question. Okay, now normally this is where I would say open your eyes, but to your credit, Sonoma County, ain't nobody's eyes closed in this crowd. Good on you, right? But you did do what everybody does, and that is as soon as you realized what I was asking you to say, you all laughed at me, right? And the reason you laughed is because this is funny. And as a comedian would say, look, this was a cheap laugh, David. A comedian like the Swami would say, sure, you made them say something ridiculous and absurd, so of course they laughed, right? I mean, the idea that I can tell you how to live your life because who my daddy is? That's ridiculous, right? Or even better, I get to tell all of you, in fact, I get to say how society will be organized because of the divine right of kings. Of course you laughed at that. That's ridiculous. And 500 years ago, people just like you and you and you and everybody in this hall not only said that, but believed it. Friends, I'm asking you to take a moment, seriously, to just contemplate that. The question of sovereignty, not just who has the authority to rule, but what are the mechanisms, what are the processes by which decisions are made and implemented, that might be the most important question that any group of human beings ask for themselves. And as Amy said in the introductory remarks, I'm a Green Party member, and you know, I'm very proud of that. I'm equally proud to tell you that I work in coalition with Democrats when I find common ground on issues. And I'm proud to tell you I work in coalition with Republicans and Libertarians when there is common ground. And let me tell you, when it comes to fights against civil liberties, the fight that we had about the NAFTA, and honestly, the fight that's gearing up against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, you bet that it will be Libertarians and principled conservatives and Republicans that I'll be working in coalition with. I work with anarchists, with socialists, with communists. See, I will work with anybody if I can find principled common ground and coalition. And I say that not so you'll pat me on the head for what a good boy I am. I say it so you'll appreciate what I mean when I tell you in my 20 years of social change work, looking for principled coalition partners, I've never had the privilege or the opportunity to work in coalition with a monarchist. I can't find any. And 500 years ago, that's all there were. And 500 years is the blink of an eye in human history. So when people tell me, oh, you can't amend the Constitution, that's too hard. We'll never do that. I think, have you not been paying attention? Throughout all of world history, and specifically throughout U.S. history, profound changes have been made. And I don't mean just changes in one president to another, one administration to another. I don't even mean one law being passed. I mean changes in the structure of how society operates. I mean changes in power dynamics. I mean cultural shifts have happened. And now, my friends, the Texans gonna get metaphysical on y'all. So hold up. You ready for this one? It's important. We are all participating in creating our shared collective reality. Another way to say that, of course, is if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. It becomes true. So if it is true that the United States of America is fundamentally racist, sexist, and class oppressive, and that is true. And if it is true that these huge transnational corporations are destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself, and that is true. See, if these things are true, I suggest we ought to start thinking and acting differently than we have been. I suggest we ought to start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis. You know why I think we ought to start acting like we're in a crisis? Because we're in a crisis! Right? It is an ecological crisis. And not just an ecological crisis that's coming, it is here and going to get worse. It is an economic crisis, and it's not just a little bubble that burst in the United States. It is a full-on global crisis meltdown. And may I continue to tell the truth and just say, capitalism cannot solve this economic crisis. In fact, capitalism is this economic crisis. The truth is liberating. It really will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And frankly, friends, we are in a social justice crisis. There is no other way to describe a scenario where the richest country the world has ever seen allows 20 to 25% of its children to go to bed hungry or undernourished. There is no other way to describe an education system that we are allowing to become corporatized and to become a full-on school-to-prison pipeline targeting black and brown children. And we know it, and yet we're allowing it to happen. There is no other way to describe, other than a social justice crisis, the knowledge that we are treating access to health care, which we know is a fundamental human right, instead we commodify it and make it dependent upon your ability to pay. There is no other way to describe this other than the social justice crisis it is. So we've got an ecological crisis, an economic crisis, a social justice crisis. In fact, we have a series of crises that are barreling down and happening right now. And don't get too freaked out, because I want to remind you that in the Chinese language, where they use symbols to describe words and concepts, the symbol or concept for the word crisis is also the symbol for another thing. Opportunity. Friends, we are blessed and cursed to be human beings at this time period, because we are cursed to be living at late-stage capitalism. And let me just say a quick little read. It goes imperialism to mercantilism, to industrialism, to capitalism, to late-stage capitalism. You know what comes next, uninterrupted? Fascism. Am I right? Yes. We got to be clear about this. We got to be willing to tell the truth. That's what's coming next. So we are cursed to be living in this moment, but we're also blessed, because as human beings, no other group of human beings have lived in a time of such technological capacity, of so much creativity, of so much knowledge. We literally could be living in a paradise. There is enough to go around. And you know, I want to share with you a quick little story that I heard from my mama when I was 6, 7 years old. I'll never forget. Me and my brother and my cousin Joe Michael. And as I tell this story, I think, can I get any more Texas redneck than that? Cousin Joe Michael. But I got a cousin Joe Michael, so there. But the three of us as little boys were fussing and fighting. We were fighting over a little Hot Wheels toy, right? Y'all know what those are, right? And I remember, because here's what else I remember. I remember that Mama came, but she didn't start yelling at us from on high. You know what Mama did? She got down with us on the floor. She got down at our level, put her hands on us, and calmed us down, right? A little loving Mama love, right? A little feminine energy, calm down the boy testosterone, calmed us down, and then said, listen, there's 3 of you. Remember, we learned how to count. 1, 2, 3, got us all to do it. And there's only one car, just one. So we can either share this car or just look around. You forgot to look around. Look at all the toys that I've seen you all play with, right? There's so much, he said. All we have to do is share or just open ourselves up to how much there is for everybody. And you know what? That made sense to me. It made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me now. And the point is that we've been taught a lie about teaching us to become selfish and greedy when in our hearts, what we really feel best about, and science also proves this, is when we share and take care of each other. That's human nature. Isn't it a tragedy that we have allowed social, political, and economic institutions to be created that actually pervert the best of our nature? And I think that we need to acknowledge that that is actually what we have allowed to happen. And that will bring me to the next topic, which is the word legal personhood. Please note I did not write corporate personhood on the board, right? Because what I want to do is be clear that we're talking about legal personhood, which literally means the ability to assert rights. And since we're talking about legal personhood, we mean the ability to assert rights under law. And saying it that way, I hope it's clear that this is not just a technicality. The question of who is a person who has the ability to assert rights under our legal system has been at the core of every social movement in this country. From the American Revolution itself, to the abolitionist movement, the women's suffrage movement, the trade union movement, the civil rights movement, every movement that really, I think, deserves to be called a people's power movement, at its core was about democracy, about power, about the ability to assert rights and assert our sovereign ability to participate in this government. And the last concept on the board is the word corporation. From what language does the word corporation derive? It's Latin. Corpus means body, and the suffix tion literally means to have or create. So corporation means to have or create body. And by body, I mean physical body. That's because in law school we are taught, and by the way, are there any lawyers in the crowd besides me that would admit it? Yeah. But Lawrence was like, yeah, but I'm with the Grange now. So Lawrence, you're the only one, I know that there are others, but you're the only one who would admit it. So I'm going to ask you, honest question, do you remember being taught in law school like I do that a corporation is a legal fiction?
Yes.
Yes. Every lawyer I've asked that question to remembers that. And what fact? Watch this. Even those of you who were not subjected to 3 or 4 years of the law school experience, if you've heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, even if you couldn't precisely define that term, raise your hand. If a corporation is legal, all these hands go up, right? A corporation is legal fiction, corporation is legal fiction. Friends, if a corporation is a legal fiction, that begs this question: what does the word fiction mean? Made up. Not true. I remember day 1 of corporations class, the law school professor, she stood up before us and said, you have to understand that a corporation does not actually exist in the material physical world. You know, reality. It doesn't actually exist, she said, but she said, we're going to pretend like, and the culture will pretend like, this group of people, but more importantly, the materials, the resources, and the contractual obligations that they make, and the deeper cultural assumptions, a very rich, complex concept. We're going to pretend like it's a single one thing under law. And remember, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. Poof. A corporation is a construct. We create it in our society and then give it legal meaning. And the word corporation comes from Latin because the first corporations ever created by the genius of clever human beings occurred during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish that we'd spend a little time asking, hey, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? Because that might be an important conversation in the United States. Yeah, that's a slow burn for some people, right? But here's the point. Deeper still, the Romans created corporations for a reason, right? For example, who here has heard, or better yet, even said the phrase, all roads lead to Rome? Yeah, here it is, 2,000 years later, we still say that, right? Check it out. That road system was built and operated as a corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system, that amazing bit of engineering that moved water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. May I interrupt myself for just a moment to say, part of the reason that I have so much hope and optimism, even in light of what I know is happening now, is because I know how clever human beings are. Right? In fact, I dare say you could not give me a problem that I can't tell you the solution to if you give me about 30 minutes and access to the internet. Hey, I'm not saying I have the answer because I don't. I'm not that smart. I'm saying in 30 minutes I can find somebody who's found the answer and actually allow me to correct myself. In 30 minutes, I can find a group of people working collective, community in together. I can find a group of people collectively who figured out the solution. Because here's another thing they don't tell us, is we're better in groups. They try to teach us individualism, but the reality is that together as primates, we are more loving, we are more compassionate, we are more clever, we are better in every way in groups. And that aqueduct system was conceived, built, designed, and operated as a corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospital. Can you guess? Corporation, corporation. So a pop quiz. What is a road system? A water system? A university? A hospital? What do they all have in common?
They serve the people.
They all serve the people. They're all public projects. Check this out. The whole idea of creating a corporation was to create a mechanism to allow individuals to pool resources, money, material, and put it to some public use. Saying it that way, I hope it's obvious that move to amend is not anti-corporation. That's foolish. That's like saying, I'm anti-hammer. And somebody else say, no, I'm pro-hammer. And then we get a big fight about it. In fact, to put a fine point on it, I'm going to use you, Swami, if I may, as an example. I want you to imagine, well, Stephen, I guess. Without the turban, he's Stephen. I want you to imagine that Stephen is a person who does not have a house to live in. But fortunately, standing before him is a skilled carpenter with hammer in hand. And I've got this tool and I'm building a house and you're going to live in it. This is going to keep you dry in the rain. It's going to keep you warm in the winter. So is that a good hammer? Well, you bet it is, right? Here I go. Work. Now, Stephen, I want you to imagine standing before you, same fella, hammer in hand. Sadly for you, my intention is to bash your skull. Hammer, good or bad? Trick question! Exactly! The hammer is neither good or bad. In this scenario, the first scenario, you have productive David Cobb, right? Using the tool appropriately. In the second scenario, you have bad David Cobb. Apparently homicidal David Cobb. Putting the tool to a very inappropriate use. What I want to suggest to you, friends, is this. We have to come to terms that it is, at best, an unsophisticated argument to say, I'm against corporations. We should go just a little bit deeper and recognize that actually what we're against is homicidal destructive practices. What we're against are exploitation and oppression, and we are certainly against allowing the most dominant institution and most powerful tools that clever, creative human beings have ever been used to be put to concentrating all the wealth, power, and decision-making authority while they destroy the planet, right? That's what we're against. But I want to now be very clear, because I think it's super important to recognize this notion of the corporation and whether it can be put to good or bad use. That the modern transnational corporation is literally being put to bad use. Almost exclusively. It's designed to do it. And you know why? Because the transnational corporation, I don't mean just business practices, I mean the huge mega transnational corporation, that entire entity was actually created during the 14th and 15th century of Europe. You know, the age of discovery. I have to put discovery in those imaginary quotation marks because after all, what did the Europeans discover? Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash, there were people living there. They weren't lost. Nobody was discovered. And so with the same courage, I'm going to challenge us to acknowledge this. The age of discovery was a lie taught to us in our history books. because it wasn't the age of discovery at all. It was the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. It was conquest, and specifically it was imperial conquest. And stay with me, because here's where it becomes important. The modern transnational corporation was created during this era as an intentional, deliberate instrument of European empire. When they were first created, they were called joint stock companies. And the joint stock company was specifically created to facilitate destruction. For example, one of the most famous of those joint stock companies was the East India Company. Many of you have heard of it. Literally designed to militarily conquer the entire subcontinent of India. And not only that, but to force those people to work and labor, to force them to send their own natural resources to the shareholders of the East India Company as profit. It was a business model based on empire. Likewise, the Africa Trading Company. Anybody want to guess what the Africa Trading Company traded? Thank you. You know, I'm going to use myself as an example because I think it's important, and stories are important. See, if I am casual, and I don't mean sloppy or lazy, I mean if I'm just not really thinking, if I'm just being a product of this society, and somebody were to ask me, what do you think the Africa Trading Company traded? Where my head would go? Slaves. I mean, of course it would, right? Because as a child, I was taught about the horrors of that transatlantic slave trade. I was taught how wonderful it was that Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth were runaway slaves who helped other slaves run away. In fact, what if instead of being taught that Harriet Tubman was a runaway slave, we were taught that she and others were self-liberated human beings? See the difference in just how we talk about something all of a sudden changes the story? Because now that I've made a big deal about that word slaves, let me ask you, in the 14th and 15th century, was Africa populated by slaves? No, Africa was populated by people, right? People. And may I say, with some trepidation, but with conviction, Africa was populated by people who were basically like me. Now, I say it with trepidation because I'm not stupid. I know what skin color I have. But I say it with conviction because if you ask any scientist, if you ask any biologist, they will tell you race does not exist. Sure, skin color exists and pigment exists, but so does hair color. Well, that's a bad choice. Eye color. Eye color exists, right? Facial features exist. See, scientists would say, sure, there's little, trivial markers, but no biologist would elevate these trivialities to a classification or a taxonomy for human beings. So without a doubt, race does not exist. But check this out. Racism damn sure does. What? Oh yes. If enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. Friends, stay with me because the reason I want to go into this is because race got created as a construct the same way the corporation got created, and it was for a reason. And you know why? To bamboozle white people. White folks, this is for you. This is for us. We've got to actually learn this history. For example, I know I descend from the Scots and the Irish, and which is why I have a particular hatred for empire, especially the English empire. So I want to ask, right? Yeah, right? Some other Irish. So here's a question. How many other Irish in the crowd that know you're Irish? All right, all these hands go up. Congratulations, folks. You're recently white. I'm not joking. Some of you know this, right? There's a great book called How the Irish Became White. And so if you want to go into this, I would encourage that book because here's the thing. Whiteness got created. Yes, nationalities and ethnicities pre-existed, but whiteness got created in the United States of America in about the 16th, 17th century. It was literally created here in order to bamboozle white people. And it went like this. If you have my pigment, but you're being exploited and oppressed, you know, man, the boss man's boot is on my neck constantly. I hate this. Oh, but I'm white. Whiteness got created to confuse working class white people to think that actually somehow elevated them over the darker skinned folks who were even more exploited and oppressed. So there was a little privilege associated with it, but actually we were all still being exploited. It's just that the black and the brown folks were being more exploited. And folks, for white people people, I doubt any are in this crowd who think this, but I sometimes think that folks who are so proud of being white as if that means a damn thing, I suggest you go to a rich person's country club and show up and say, I ain't got no money, but I'm white. Can I come in? Just see how that works. Right? So all I'm getting at is what we have to be clear about is white supremacy and corporatism and imperialism are inextricably linked. And what links them is exploitation and oppression. So if we are going to actually create a peaceful, just, democratic, and ecological society, we are going to have to come to terms with the fact that we have to reconstitute our entire social, political, and economic institutions and base it on peace and love and compassion. And that, yeah, I thought that. Start talking about love. I am angry at injustice, but you know, St. Thomas Aquinas, I believe, is the one who said that hope has two beautiful daughters. Anger at the injustice, and hope and ability to make the change. And I think that that's actually what we actually have to start recognizing is it's okay to be angry, but we can't stay in anger. We have to let our anger motivate us to make change. And you know the amazing thing about doing that? You transform to joy. It's an amazing thing, right? You get angry at the injustice. You start to work to create a better world. You start to find other people that you're doing that work with. And the next thing you know, you're giggling and happy. It's a wonderful thing. Try it sometime. Get involved in the food sovereignty movement. Get involved in the campaign to end the school-to-prison pipeline or to end prisons or anything. Just pick it and get involved with it. And the next thing you know, your cynicism will begin to evaporate. It's been my experience, right? So here's the thing. I want to remind you that this is just a story, right? So I want to make this story a particularly American story, and to do it I will ask this question. How many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? 13. Folks, that's an easy one. We all know that. 13 colonies. So here's the somewhat harder question. Of those 13 colonies, how many of them were corporations? It was supposed to be a trick question, but y'all are too clever. All of them, because the word corporation means to have or create body. And I'm telling you that it took the king to create each one of them. The king created Massachusetts. And the king created Massachusetts by the use of a very particular legal instrument called a charter. Right? And to illustrate how the king created Massachusetts by the use of a charter, we'll do another exercise. In this exercise, I'll be the king. Hey, why do y'all think I get to be the king? Because I'm telling the story, Alex. See how important stories are? See how important it is we ask who's telling these stories? We ought to think about that sometimes because as our media critic in the back, Professor Phillips would tell you that the stories that are being told today in our current economy and in our current society are all actually owned by now, I think it's 7. There are like 7 media corporations control about 90% of the content of the media that we're consuming. So let's give it up to people's media that's finally fighting back. Here because I want to talk to whoever is not in this hall but is watching us on either cable access or maybe you're watching this on the internet or you're watching it somewhere else. But if you're watching this not live, if you're watching us now, you're only watching it because there's a fella behind the camera. Sir, what's your name right there?
Me?
Yes, sir.
Peter.
Peter.
Occupy Santa Rosa.
Occupy, because Peter from Occupy Santa Rosa. Decided he was tired of just hating the corporate media. He was going to become the people's media. So, right, the point I'm making is we got to understand that we need to actually start telling our own stories. And that we need to start creating our own media institutions. And while we're at it, let's start creating our own healthcare systems and our own food production and distribution systems. See, we need to start creating our own schools. We need to start creating everything for ourselves by ourselves. Right?
Yes.
So, I'm going to go back to this little story, though. In this story, I'm going to be the king, and as the king, I will create Massachusetts by the use of the legal charter. But I'm the king. I'm not going to bother with the day-to-day affairs of Massachusetts. So instead, I will create a new legal title called the Royal Governor. And now, my friends, I will quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts. I, the King, create Massachusetts. Assign a royal governor. Task the royal governor with the legal responsibility. And here comes the quote. Quote, to plant, to rule, and to govern this entire area on behalf of me, the King, to benefit me, the King, but also to benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation on the same imperial business model as the East India Company. So too with Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. Virginia began as the Virginia Company. Anybody know, by the way, Georgia, a penal corporation. Somebody tell me what skin color the original slaves had in Georgia.
White.
Louder. White. See how whiteness is like, I swear to goodness, I wish that more white people would just spend a little bit of time learning the history of how white supremacy was actually created. Yeah, you get a little bit of less of the boot on your neck, but on the whole, the rich fat cats are the ones laughing at us for how stupid we are. The point is, though, that in the American Revolution, that threw this over, that the American Revolution was not just a rejection of monarchy as a form of rule. It was that, but you know what else the American Revolution was? A people's uprising against corporate rule. It was a people's uprising. In fact, the Boston Tea Party, it was an act of nonviolent civil disobedience targeting a specific transnational corporation because of its ties to government. Sometimes I wish the modern Tea Party movement would do a little more research. See, I mean, think about it. I've been involved in nonviolent civil disobedience targeting specific corporations. Maybe we've got something in common if we actually spend a little bit of time thinking about this. All I'm getting at is, in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won, and yay that. Right? Because I will stand before you and say, I am a revolutionary. And it feels good to say it out loud. Now, I'm a nonviolent revolutionary to be sure, but I am a revolutionary because I think that we need to start saying it and acknowledge it, giving ourselves. And now that I've said it out loud, anybody else would actually say, you know what, yeah, I think I'm a revolutionary too. Just raise your hand. Look at this, right? All we have to do is give ourselves permission to say it, and what we realize is, wow, we're not alone at all, are we? So in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won, and of course, after the Revolution, a new charter gets written, a new document to describe the supreme law of the land. This document, our charter, is used as a framework for our politics. What is that charter called? The U.S. Constitution. The Constitution. How many of y'all have read this document? Okay, a lot of hands go up. Y'all read my papers. See if I don't get this right. I'll tell you, when you read the Constitution in its entirety, not just individual words, but you read it to understand the system. My mama said, son, don't just try to understand any one thing. Now, she wouldn't have said it this way, but that's like this Descartesian, Baconian notion that we just deconstruct things to its smallest part. That's actually a foolish way to understand anything. If you really want to understand something, look at the patterns. Step back, look at the big picture. If you look at the Constitution that way, I will tell you, you'll see two actors at play. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's so important, it's the first three words.
We the people.
We the people. Common words in this country, and they should be. See, we the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Saying it this way, I hope it's clear, we the people create government. Government is dependent upon us. As some of my colleagues like to say, the people should never be afraid of the government. Actually, they say government should be afraid of the people. How many of y'all believe that government is afraid of the people? Yeah, it's a slow burn, right? But several of you raise your hands right away. If you don't think that the governing class and the ruling elite are afraid of the people, I got one word for you. Occupy. Right? Occupy. And I tell you, by the way, I don't know, I had the privilege of traveling the country and speaking to probably 40 or 50 Occupy encampments during the height of the Occupy encampment era. And let me tell you something, the encampment era may be over thanks to the Obama administration and the Department of Homeland Security and police department's collusion to do it, but Occupy ain't over, right? Occupy ain't over. And I don't know exactly what Occupy 2.0 is going to look like. It's gestating right now. I can sense it, right? But whatever, Move to Amend would never dare to speak for Occupy, but we happily collaborate with Occupy. And let me tell you something, when Occupy 2.0 comes rolling out, Move to Amend and David Cobb is going to be right there saying, all right, let's go, let's get it, right? But during the Occupy encampment, I had the privilege of giving this presentation workshops to probably 40, 50 encampments. And everywhere I went with humility. And I mean this sincerely, right? Because for one thing, because I've been trying to work on what they pulled off for like 20 years. And it's like all you had to do was pitch a tent in Zuccotti Park. I didn't know. I did that a long time ago. But so I went with humility to these Occupy encampments and just said, I have a gift that I'd like to offer by way of a teach-in. Everywhere I went, I was welcomed. And you know what I saw at those Occupy encampments? I saw ordinary people talking to each other, right? See, the ruling elite don't mind us talking to each other if we're talking about sports and celebrity and American Idol and Kim Kardashian. See, we're allowed to talk about that. But as soon as we start talking about why does 1% control 99%, that all of a sudden freaks them out. It makes them scared. And I'll tell you, honestly, folks, I wish I could talk to some member of the real ruling elite in this country, because I would like to say, please don't be scared. I understand that you're scared right now because you're so addicted to that crack pipe of power, right, that you can't even see anything clear. But I promise you that your children, or certainly your grandchildren, are going to be grateful that we staged an intervention on your addicted ass. Right? Because these people are so addicted to power they can't see reality, and they are destroying our planet. The planet that they depend upon too. They've got children, right? Honestly, folks, they are mentally ill, right? Yes. They are. And I don't say that ugly, right? I've got relatives who are mentally ill. People who are mentally ill deserve help. And honestly, if we had a just and compassionate society, with single-payer health care, if we had a just and compassionate society, we would get these people help. Instead, we put them in charge. That's kind of our fault, really. All I'm getting at is that during the Occupy encampment, what you saw was the beginning of a movement, and I think it was a revolutionary movement, and I don't think it's over. Right? That we, the people, are free and sovereign. And what does the word sovereign mean again? The authority to rule. See, the king isn't sovereign, we kicked his butt out. But government isn't sovereign. Government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. At least supposed to be accountable to whom? The people. That's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. Let's continue. We the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. And as a lawyer, I'm going to stop for a moment and tell you the difference between rights and duties is profound. If I've got the right to do something, it means I can do it. And I don't need this group's permission. I don't need the city council's permission. I don't need the state government's permission. Man, I'm from Texas. I don't need my mama's permission. Legally. Culturally, maybe different. And how about this? Why do we have a legal system that allows us to do things that our mama would be embarrassed about?
Because we're free and sovereign.
We the people are free and sovereign. We have rights. Rights can be done whether anybody likes it or not. And get this, government cannot prevent me from exercising my rights. Any law that is passed that infringes upon my or your sovereign right to speak or to assemble or to be free of search and seizure. See, the Constitution doesn't create rights. The Constitution recognizes rights. They are rights that are, and now don't get alarmed, this is just going to be one button, so don't get freaked out. But for those of you in the back who can't see, I am now pointing to my belly button. If you're too shy to look in this public place, go home and make sure you got one. Because if you do, you also have human rights that are sacred and cannot be violated by political processes. So it doesn't matter if the Jim Crow segregation laws go through some sort of political process. Those laws were illegitimate because they violated human rights. We have to understand that we need to start framing our work as human rights work, that there's sometimes that laws are just illegitimate because they are violating our human rights. And yeah, right, we need to think that way. And get this. Government never has rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And duties are responsibilities. And where do those duties come from? Well, remember, all power resides with the people. And that brings me to this quick pop quiz. What is the population more or less of, are we in Sebastopol right here? What is the population more or less of the city of Sebastopol? About 7,000, 8,000? 8,000. So I will celebrate that 8,000 folks have all the municipal power. But I'll tell you this, I would hate to go to a meeting of 8,000 people where we decide where should the stop signs go. And I like political meetings. I don't want to go to that one. Now, how many people in Sonoma County? 350,000 people. Anybody want to go to a meeting of 350,000 people where we decide county policy? Now, what are we, about 38 million in California? Anybody want to go to a meeting of 38 million people to make state laws? Point is, in this framework, the people do have all the political power, but we wisely delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Do we delegate all our power to government? Hell no! In fact, we only delegate enough power for government to perform the duties that we, the people, have told them to do. In fact, that's what limited government even means. Government is limited in its power to perform the duties that we, the people, have told them to perform. And government discharges their duties by writing laws and other policies to reflect public policy. That's how this system is supposed to work. And there's going to be disagreement about what that public policy is. And you know what? That's as it should be. There should be rigorous debate and discourse. But I'll tell you something. We've lost something in this country because we've forgotten how to disagree agreeably. We have lost something by trying to demonize people that don't agree with us. And I'm going to promise you this. Even if I disagree with you, in fact, especially if I disagree with you, I will try to be respectful to you. Because it's easy to respect somebody who's in complete agreement with you and maybe saying nice things to you. But the real challenge is actually to find the humanity and the commonality that we have with people even when we disagree. I'm not saying we have to lose our passion. I hope you can tell I got passion for my politics, right? But I think that we can be passionate about struggling, a real struggle for the world that we want to create, and still be respectful and civil and recognize the humanity of people who have a different worldview. We need to really be struggling for that. The other thing I want to remind you is, in terms of public policy, even if I like or don't like a public policy, one thing that no public policy or public law is ever supposed to be able to do is to violate the private rights of anybody. See how different, how important that distinction is? And now that I've taken the time to go through and outline the Constitution this way, I'm going to now tell you in one sentence how the U.S. Constitution is supposed to operate. Now, it's a run-on sentence to be sure, but it's still just one sentence. It goes like this. In the U.S. Constitution, we the people are free and sovereign because we hold all the political power. But we wisely delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Government that we will hold subordinate and accountable. We will charge government with the duty to write laws in the public interest. These are local laws, county laws, state laws, even federal laws. But the one thing that no law can do is to ever violate the private rights of the free and sovereign people who live there. Ta-da! Yeah. We should try that in this country. This would totally work. And I'm not joking, this is brilliant. And I'm not joking, this is beautiful. And I'm not joking that we've never tried it. Because before I go 1 second further, waxing poetic about the brilliance and beauty of the United States Constitution, I got to give a quick time out to ask, in what year was this Constitution either drafted in secret convention, or better yet, the year that this document was ratified and becomes the supreme law of the land? Nicely done. 1787 is the convention. 1789 is the ratification date. The reason I want 1789 on the board is to remind you that we now know that legal personhood means the ability to assert rights. So in 1789, who got to assert rights? Who was a legal person? What were their characteristics? They were white, male, landowning property owners. In fact, you had to own a lot of land. That's a lot of characteristics. In fact, a lot of qualifications. Anybody know what percentage of the what percentage of the human beings living here were actually legal persons? What percentage? 1%. 1%. Yeah, the 99%, that's pretty cute, right? We are the 99%. But don't be so cynical. It wasn't 1%. It was 5%. Literally, 95% of the human beings living in the founding of this country were not legally persons. Another way to say it, we got to tell the truth. This document, for all its beautiful rhetoric that we've been taught to revere, this document was used to legalize and codify a system of extermination of the indigenous human beings who already lived here. This document, for all its beauty and all that we're taught to revere it, was used to codify and legalize the enslavement of Africans who were brought at the barrel of a gun, the point of a spear, and forced to build this country with slave labor. This document, for all its beauty that we were taught to revere, was used to codify a system of patriarchy that prevented women from being full persons. Women couldn't even own property. Folks, women were property by any reasonable understanding of that word. And get this. Most of the white men were not legally persons either, because most of the white men were indentured servants or at best second-class citizens. I like how Howard Zinn said it, may the goddess rest his soul. Howard Zinn said, the entire history of the United States can be seen as a series of struggles by actual human beings to be defined as persons with rights under this Constitution. See how important personhood is? And so now it might behoove us to ask, well, where should the corporation go? Well, after all, it's the most dominant institution on planet Earth. Before I put the word corporation on the board, let me ask this question. Honestly, for those who know, somebody tell me what it takes to actually form a corporation in California today. Anybody know? Answer, 2 people file some paperwork and pay a filing fee. And as long as your check clears and you filled out that paperwork correctly, the Secretary of State will magically issue you a particular document called a charter. You know what you can do with that charter? Anything legally permissible. That's what the Corporation Code now says. Apparently, if you have enough money, you can do illegal things. But the point is that, oh, and by the way, you know how long the corporate charter can last in California? Forever. Right? And isn't it interesting, most of us have not been taught, nor do we really have very many opportunities to have conversations like this about, hey, this is the most dominant institution in our very society. Maybe we should learn more about it. Maybe we should know how it operates, where it came from, right? And now I'm going to take you back to 1789. I'm going to take you back to 1789 and tell you what it once took to form a corporate charter. And this was true in every state in the Union and was true for the next 100 years. First, your application did not go to some trivial clerk. Your application went directly to the State House of Representatives, where they debated it and voted on it, and you had to get a majority vote. And that's not enough, because if you got the majority vote of the State House, it goes to the State Senate, or the Assembly, where they debated, vote on it, and you've got to get another majority vote. And if you got a majority vote in the State House and the State Senate, it now goes to the governor, who considers it and has to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything like a corporate charter today? Of course not. What did I just describe? A law, right? The legislative process, how a bill becomes a law. The point I'm making is that the founders' original intent, you know, for those people who think that the founders' original intent really matter, the founders' original intent of the corporation was to tightly control it politically. And deeper still, if a charter was granted, all you could do was the specific narrow thing that you had been allowed your charter to do. And if you did any other kind of business, you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charter was revoked merely for going ultra-virus or beyond the authority, because it was understood that the political process had the authority to allow it to exist or not exist. And if a corporate charter was even allowed to exist, it could only exist for 10 years, 15 years. Every corporate charter was limited in its duration, and at the end of that duration, the corporate charter automatically dissolved. Now, the business could continue, but limited liability as a practice was limited politically, and it dissolved. And if you wanted to continue to operate with limited liability, you had to politically apply all over again. And now get this, friends. Even if you were operating in the narrow time period that your corporate charter existed, even if you were doing the specific, highly controlled thing for which the corporate charter had been granted, if you ever did anything to violate the public trust, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked! Corporate charters were routinely revoked for merely acting outside the public interest. So that brings me to this pop quiz question. Somebody name a single one of the Fortune 500 corporations that could even exist today under those rules. I'll wait. Not a single one. The point is, many a small business could operate, but not a single one of the Fortune 500 corporations would even be allowed to exist if the same political processes and controls that the founders once had on the corporation. Now, friends, I'm not telling you that 1789 was the land of milk and honey. We've already covered that, right? Slavery existed. The patriarchy was real. The economic system was unjust. What I'm saying is the instrument, the tool known as the corporation was appropriately and politically controlled, right? And so now that we know that it takes an action of state government to actually create that charter, we understand that the corporate charter can be used to hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We understand that the corporate charter describes the duties of what a corporation can or cannot do. We understand that the corporate charter should only be allowed to exist if it serves the public interest. Isn't it just painfully obvious that a corporation should be here? And now, my friends, I thank you for your patience, because here comes the punchline. When the U.S. Supreme Court comes waltzing in and an act of supreme judicial activism says, and by the way, when 5 of them say, oh no, 5 of us are going to tell 300 million of you, you've got to now start treating this artificial entity as if it's a person with rights, it perverts the whole framework. See, corporate personhood in this context is a shorthand for that idea, court-created, totally illegitimate, that a corporation must be treated as if it's a person with inherent and inalienable constitutional rights. And friends, that is not just an illogical idea, which it is. That's not just a stupid idea, which it is. But this idea has been used to steal our collective sacred right to self-government. And what pisses me off as a lawyer is that they're using the legal system to codify and legalize the theft. To which I say, and more Americans are saying, ya basta. Enough already. It's the great rallying cry of our sisters and brothers in the global south. And by the way, if we really want to learn how to do a democracy movement, Americans have got to get our heads out of our collective rectums and take a look at the rest of the world where they are actually leading the charge. The global south knows what time it is. And if we do that, and when we do that, we can start to do what they have done and start to reclaim our sovereign right to self-government and begin the process to create the peaceful, just, ecologically sustainable, democratic, and ultimately loving and compassionate world that we deserve. Peace. So in order to do it, we're a big crowd. I will ask you if you want to make a comment or ask a question. We're going to do a stack. I will beg you, be short and concise with your question or comment. I will be short and concise with my response, and we can share the space. So let's get, all right, so watch this. Remember your number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the back, 6. Judith, 7. All right, so we'll do another quick run, but before come here today?
Hundreds of dollars.
I did.
Yeah.
It's not true. I didn't charge anything. And that, my friends, is my standard fee. Nothing. But my colleague Margaret, who I'm traveling with, we both still like to eat, friends. So we're gonna, if this were Texas, there wouldn't be a man without a hat on his head. What's wrong with y'all? Well, there's some baskets. So bring those baskets up to the front or bring something, because we're literally just gonna do an old-fashioned pass the hat, right? And I'm gonna say, if you don't want to put any money in that, don't. That's totally fine. I mean it. This presentation was a free will gift, and you are free to give or not give as you like. But I will say, if you're capable of giving, please be generous. And I'm a lawyer. I literally make about 10% of the money I used to make as a successful trial lawyer. I don't tell you that so you'll feel sorry for me. I say that so you put some damn money in the hat. And if you're capable of writing a check, the check goes made out to move to amend. And if you want to mail it, you mail it to P.O. Box 610 in Eureka, California. That's right, I have found it. Eureka, California, 95501. And now I will ask person, comment, question. Oh, before I end. Also, Margaret and Judith and others are going to pass, and Amy are going to pass a sign-up sheet. I want to be clear. This sign-up sheet, friends, is not something that we're just going to submit to elected officials and beg them to look at it. This is an organizing petition. This is an opportunity for us to get in touch with you. I'm going to share this list with the local Sonoma County Move to Men chapter. And before we open it up for discussion, I want everybody who is in the local Sonoma County Move to Men chapter to please stand up for a moment. Please stand up if you're in the Sonoma County. I know Alan is waiting in the back. Look around, because listen, folks, tomorrow I will be gone. I will be, I don't even know, where we're going to go. San Francisco. I'll be in San Francisco tomorrow. But you will still be here. And so will Alan, and Amy, and Judith, and Anna, and Jerry. See, the local people are still here doing work. The second thing I want to say is, before we open it up, is that they meet on the first Saturday. So the first Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. at the Arlen Francis Center. I love those people, right? And if Peter Gable ever asked, tell him that David Cobb said, hey. At the Arlen Francis Center at 66 9th, am I remembering that? 99.6. 99.6 in Santa Rosa at the depot. The point is, these people are doing the work day in and day out. Good catch, Swami! Look at that! That's right. We're not going to fall down. We got it. We got it. I can run this country. The point is that these folks are working on the local level. So as this comes around, I'm going to urge you, if you're not already in touch with us, go ahead and pass it around, Alan. Please sign up. And if you're going to sign up, start that in the back, Alan. We'll get one in the front, and we'll get one started in the back. Because here's the thing, if we can't read your handwriting, we can't be in touch with you. So if you've got bad handwriting, please print legibly, right? So what is it, Peter? You need something from me?
I just wanted to announce the video.
All right, so go ahead very quickly, and then we're going to open it up. Make it quick.
Yes, sir. The video will probably be on YouTube tomorrow. I'll try to put it on tonight. It'll take a while to upload. Look for it under David Cobb at the Sebastopol Grange. Is anybody here that objects to me bringing the camera up here so that when you ask the question, I turn it and put it on you?
I would prefer not to be on camera.
Is that okay?
So you got people who prefer not to be on camera.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. And thanks for asking. Let's finally go to thank you. Number one. Yes.
Do I just have to be a resident of Sonoma County, or do I also have to be a U.S. citizen?
So the question is, do you have to be a U.S. citizen to participate in Move to Men? And the answer is no, absolutely not. You have to be a living, breathing human being. You have to actually be a sentient, living creature. But we absolutely understand and know that we need a global human rights movement, and that's why the Move to Amend is working not only with the United States Social Forum, but with the World Social Forum. We are participating in a respectful way with a global movement. So absolutely not. Everybody come in. And let's also be clear about this. Like, this whole notion of citizenship is also a construct. Human beings are who I want to work with.
Yeah.
Number two. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you spoke about like women as property and the role of patriarchy and corporatism and whatnot, but in your awesome analysis of what was going on in like the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries and like the rise of corporatization and imperialism, I noticed that you left out the role of the Inquisition and the persecution of women to like grab their property, and I didn't know if there is a connection that you have discovered historically that was like systematic in terms of creating corporations,
Right, so
lands that were grabbed from women who were tried in the Inquisition.
So I'm going to try, for Peter's sake, into the microphone. So the question is, what about the role of the Spanish Inquisition as a way to actually steal property of some women, because some women were actually in that time period able to hold wealth, and what was the role there? The answer is yes, that was obviously part of it. And it's a deeper thing, right? I mean, like anything, whether it's patriarchy or capitalism or you know, any of the exploitations and oppressions, it goes deep. And for me, what I would recommend to you and anybody else who's interested in trying to understand that historically, for me, the book that was the most influential and the most helpful of looking at this is by Rianne Eisler. It's called The Chalice and the Blade. And it actually begins the process of understanding and exploring sort of how that worked. So that's probably the best place. I don't personally know and don't have experience of researching the Spanish Inquisition specifically, but I do know that patriarchy, mercantilism, imperialism, and frankly any type of system that's based on exploitation and oppression, you're going to find a small ruling elite lording over others. So that's what this presentation is an effort to do, and I thank you for underscoring the fact that all of this, this story that I told is just a first gloss. Every single one of these threads could go deeper and be more opportunity for us to really understand why we are in. And see, I don't want to do this kind of history so that I can be a really cool movement Trivial Pursuit player. This history is about understanding where we are and how we got here so we can figure out what we need to do now and how to deconstruct it and create something differently. So, I don't know about the Spanish Inquisition, and if you or anybody else can give me a recommendation on how I can continue my study, I would be open to it. Number 3. Yes, sir.
Noam Chomsky argues that since we are at a point now where elections are for sale to the highest bidder, and our politicians are for sale to the highest bidder, and our regulatory agencies are profoundly corrupted and have been sold out to the highest bidder, given that he argues that we're basically a fascist state now. And I'm wondering if you have any
Well, yes, I mean, as you heard me use that word earlier, and so the F word. Fascism. We actually have to get more comfortable talking about it. And I want to be clear, friends, the fascism, Benito Mussolini, who was actually a political philosopher, right? Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator, actually said fascism, more properly understood, should be called corporatism. Because it merges the military might of the corporation with the military might of our nation state. And he liked it. See, he was a proponent and an advocate. He was proud of it. So I'm telling you this. I think, in fact, there is a fantastic analysis put together by a group of political science professors who actually have studied just fascist countries and totalitarian countries and come up with 14 characteristics. You can do an internet search on this, and what they say is this is what they look like. And then I challenge anybody in this room to objectively take a look at those 14 characteristics and begin to compare the United States of America today. And I want to be clear, That's true under Reagan or Clinton or Bush the elder or Bush the junior or Barack Obama, and see if you're not actually seeing those characteristics play out in this country now. I agree with Noam Chomsky, but I want to be clear. We actually now are living in what we'll now call, and thank you George Herbert Walker Bush, a kinder, gentler fascism. And let's be clear, it's a kind of fascism that for white people you get a little more leeway, right? That's true, right? But it's also interesting that, and watch out white people, because that white skin privilege is evaporating.
Right.
You don't believe me? Occupy. Right? Those kids in Davis, California, who deserve a tip of the hat, no doubt about it. Most of those were white, and they stood up and got, not just harassed, right? They got brutally assaulted by the apparatus, right? That is happening everywhere. And I was at the WTO protest in November of 1999. Anybody else there? I know Judith was. I was there with you. Several of us were there, right? I also was at the the World Bank protest in D.C. and the IMF, International Monetary Fund protest in New York a couple of years later. Then I went to Florida for the fight against the FTAA, the Free Trade Area of the Americas. Anybody go to that one? Daniel, did we see something fundamentally different?
Much less restraint on police violence?
Exactly. The police violence got more explicit, more horrific. The movement and federalized and militarized. What I'm saying is that I am witnessing in a decade, 15 years, a militarization of the police state, a use and a willingness to use violence against us. And I want to be clear, I'm a nonviolent revolutionary, but I'm not a pacifist. I think that we have to engage in self-defense wherever it makes sense. And I'll tell you this. I think that we need to hide right out in the open. That the one thing that we can count on is that there is more of us than there are of them. And the only way to confront this growing fascism is to tell the truth, to put our words out. And I love what, and I want to move on, but this is a profound question that you've asked me to react to. I think Subcomandante de Marcos said it best in Our Word is Our Weapon. He said, we wear the mask to make ourselves visible because you try to make us invisible. I think that what we have to do is recognize that we are in an opportunity for a postmodern revolution. Because the real battle these days are not in the streets, they're in our minds. And as soon as we start to actually understand how much power we have and exercise it, we win. It's just that simple, right? Number 4.
I'm passing. Mine was the announcement.
Thank you. Number 5.
Hi, thank you for your sharing with us today. My name is John Baruna, Global Community Network, and with the Climate Reality Project. And I'm kind of curious, when you mentioned you wouldn't want to be in a room with 38 million people, how you feel about using today's technology to create a real direct democracy so that our representatives aren't representatives, they're just there to do the duties that we tell them to do.
So thank you. Is it John?
John.
John.
John Baruna.
John. So thank you, John. So John's whole point was I wouldn't want to be in a room with 38 million people to make decisions, but he challenged me, what would I feel like about using technology to have 38 million people sort of collectively in a communitarian way actually make decisions, to which I would say I would love to do that. I'm not joking. I believe that we need to start experimenting with new methods, with new methodologies, with new ways. And again, I'm not trying to be sycophantic to the Occupy Wall Street movement, but one of the things that Occupy has really taught us is to get out of the box of how it is that we can make and implement decisions and how we can do activism. And I'm going to, since I've mentioned Occupy a couple times, I just want to say really quickly, I'm not proud of this. I'm kind of embarrassed. Does anybody know who Kali Lazem is? Yeah, right? He's the publisher of Adbusters magazine, which actually put out the first call for Occupy Wall Street, which started after Move to Amend, by the way. And I say that only so you can understand this context. So I got this email from Kali, and when you run for president, as a Green, I'm a third-tier progressive celebrity, which means that every now and then somebody might return a phone call. That's all it means, right? But so I know Kali, so I called him up and I said, I got this thing. And he said, oh, David, that's wonderful. And he's this Estonian being Canadian, right? So French Canadian with an East European accent. This crazy accent. Oh, I'm so glad. This is wonderful. So you'll participate, yes? And I was like, actually, no. I said, Kali, and he said, oh, but you're missing the point. I said, look, I'm tired of shouting at buildings. Like, we need a concrete campaign, and Rule to Amend is a concrete campaign for power. And he said, you're missing the point. It's a postmodern, a meme, a tipping point, culture of this and that. And it was like all this kind of what I thought was kind of jargon, right? And I said, good luck to you, but I think you're wrong. And you know what? I tell that story to admit I was wrong and he was right. There was some magic thing that was beginning to swirl around, and Occupy Wall Street was right. But also, he was wrong and I was right, because there still needs to be concrete campaigns. And John, what I'm telling you is this. What we have to do is to take concepts like you've just described that I can barely kind of understand. I'm trying my best, right? I don't want to just reject it, like, because I was kind of stupid. Like, not stupid. I was just wrong, right? And I get to be wrong. Everybody, all of us get to be wrong sometimes. But I was wrong about that. So what I'm saying is, yes, I'm willing to engage that, but you have to show me how they become concrete campaigns to put them into practice. Sound like a fair challenge back? Yes, and let's figure it out. Number 5. You were 5.
Yeah.
Number 6. My trick only works if you remember your number. Okay, so the question is, she says, I feel maybe naive, or I don't understand how those justices could vote that way. I guess in Citizens United or any of the other decisions. So what I will do is give you 2 quick responses. The first response, the first response is the best case scenario to try to imagine how it is that you can justify corporate constitutional rights. Then I'll give you a shorter answer, which I think is more descriptive and more explanatory. But the first one is the best case scenario. Let's imagine that Steve is a person with constitutional rights, which he is. Let's imagine that David is a person with constitutional rights, which I am. Let's imagine that Judith is a person with constitutional rights, which she is. Now let's imagine that the 3 of us get together and decide to create a business. We incorporate under the laws of California and create an artificial entity. The law says, well, you each have individual rights, therefore this new entity that you've created, you somehow imbue that artificial entity with rights as well. Now that doesn't make much sense, does it? So that's the best, and if anybody can make any other argument for corporate constitutional rights, I welcome it. But that's the best potential answer you can give to be explanatory. But now I will try my best to explain to you the thought process that I believe is more accurate. This whole doctrine was created out of whole cloth to justify the unjustifiable, to reflect an ability for the very few ruling elite to justify the exploitation and oppression. It is illegitimate, it is illogical, and it has no place in any democratic free society. That's my answer.
But really has nothing to gain from it. I mean, they have lifelong jobs.
They have a worldview.
They just identify.
They have a worldview. They have a worldview. I mean, look, if you can think of something else like
money and power.
Money and power, right? They just got a better version of the crack pipe. Number 7, yes, Judith.
Well, we know on one hand, Citizens United is being outdone by what's up before the courts now, McCutcheon. So that side is going like crazy. On the other hand, a couple of numbers that didn't get mentioned is that Move to Amend started 2 years ago from a few people, and we're at 320,000 folks nationally now. And there was one percentage, David, that you didn't say about the revolution. The percentage of people in all the colonies who created the first American Revolution were
3%.
understanding is 3% of all the people. Just thought I'd put that out.
So that's important, and I am going to be objective for a moment. And thank you, Judith, for giving me this opportunity. Move to Amend began in 2010. In a short amount of time, we've grown to 320,000 active supporters. And we have 165 local affiliates, including the one here, and growing. So that both of these numbers are going up. And we've helped 500 communities pass resolutions in support. That is, local city councils, county commissioners have voted in support of Move to Amend, and that number is going up. And we've helped 16 states pass resolutions already, and that number is going up. And probably my favorite number is approximately 50 communities have put this question on the ballot to let voters decide and weigh in on whether they believe corporations have constitutional rights and money is not speech. We put it on the ballot in approximately 50 communities, including in Republican-dominated areas in rural Ohio, in Texas, in Utah, in the entire state of Montana. 50 times we put it on the ballot. Guess how many times we've won?
50.
Every single one of them. We haven't lost yet. When I told you that I was going to challenge you to challenge me, is this a story that only progressives and liberals can hear? I can tell you objectively that we are winning everywhere. And I give this presentation at Grange halls and Unitarian Universalist churches and Occupy encampments, and I get laughter and I get applause. But you know what? I tell this story at Tea Party events too, and you know what? I get laughter and I get applause. Now, the laughter and applause come from totally different places. But it comes! And, you know, I would say, like, limited government, sovereignty, the founder's original intent. There's a lot of these phrases, actually, that really resonate with them. And I'm telling you, it's not, look, I don't lie about it. I just tell the same story, but I choose to emphasize some things over others. I tell it with a little bit different accent, maybe. Right? All I'm saying is that if we can learn how to talk to each other, we're going to find a lot of common ground. Now, this is the interesting thing, Judith. We are growing in our numbers, and Judith is also right. The tipping point is not 50% of 300 million Americans, right? I don't know exactly what that number is. There's not an objective way to figure it out, I don't think. But I do know this, that if we had, say, 500,000 Americans who were actually ready to throw down with nonviolent revolution and were trained in nonviolent civil disobedience when we're willing to do it, we could completely change this country like that. Like that. So I'm just saying, the whole question is, how serious are we? Number 8? Was it 8?
Stop.
7.
You only went to 7.
I'm done. We're going to do another round. So Amy is 1. Ma'am, you're 2. Sir with the fantastic Santa Claus beard, you are 3. Ma'am, you're 4. Daniel, hey, good to see you. You're 5. We'll do those 5, and then I promise we'll stop there. I'll stick around, and folks, so that we can have some conversation with one another. So we'll do those 5, and then we'll break. Number 1.
So there are like two major approaches to activism. Fight against what you don't like, create the alternative structures you want. So corporate personhood has been with us for like 100+ years. What happens if we all of a sudden make it, we reverse that with constitutional amendment, we're wildly successful? What are the legal ramifications and how do we prepare for that?
Well, let's be clear about something. Corporate constitutional rights is a doctrine that allows corporate lawyers to overturn laws, right? So the struggle for democracy, for the amendment, will open up space for more laws to be passed, right? So I just want to point out, it's not, we should get out of thinking, and I'm not saying you are doing this, but I want to challenge us to recognize that the struggle for the amendment is the struggle for the supreme law of the land. It is a political and cultural struggle, and merely in engaging in it, we begin to open up space that is not already there, right? And it means that we can start to pass laws right now and challenge them. We have colleagues at the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund who are already passing laws at the local level banning fracking, criminalizing industrial farming, criminalizing things. So you can actually do that even though they are so-called unconstitutional. The second thing that we can do is to begin to get our money out of Wall Street and invest it in, right now, community banks, right? We can do it in credit unions and public banking. We do need to start creating these new structures even as we fight, right? So we fight the things we don't want, we create the things that we do, and we stop thinking that you have to do one or the other. You know, like at the end of the day, we have to understand that real systemic social change needs both a mass movement and electoral politics, and creating alternatives. Those three things actually happen together. Now, not everybody has to do all three of them, but if you want to, I would recommend it. As somebody who ran for president as a Green Party candidate, and lobbies officials, and works on Move to Men. But I'm not joking. I am most proud that I've been to jail for justice. I've done civil disobedience, and you know what? I plan on going back again before it's all said and done. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to have to be willing to do it. So the point is, Amy, that we need to start recognizing that we do all of these things together. It begins to change our capacity for what we imagine is possible, because this is the thing. Something like amending the Constitution is absolutely impossible until all of a sudden it is. Right? This is actually how change happens. Number two. Yes?
I was number two. It wasn't the exact same words, but that was really my question, and you've answered.
Thank you. And look at that good modeling of just passing. Number three.
Good. Two quick questions there. We're coming on the 100th anniversary of the charter of the Federal Reserve, December 23rd. And have you organized anything to properly celebrate that? I would suggest torches. Just display like a birthday celebration at the 13 local chartered Federal Reserve offices. The second comment,
So let me react to that very quickly, and I want to be honest. I did not know that anniversary date. I'm embarrassed to say I know how bad the Federal Reserve is, which is, by the way, a private bank that actually controls our entire money supply. And so I don't think that there's enough time to organize anything on December 23rd of 2013, but now that you've given me this idea, I can see Move to Men like mobilizing in a huge way. If not 2013, definitely 2014. That's an important date.
the other question would be, if any of the states attempted to say, being that corporations claim personhood under the 14th Amendment, that we're going to recognize their rights under the 13th Amendment and liberate them all, declare them to be not owned by the tobacco owners.
Right, that's what this gentleman has just done is showed the logical absurdity of corporate personhood. The 13th Amendment says no person can be held in bondage, right? But the corporate persons are actually owning other corporate persons with interlocking directorates. That's exactly right. I'll tell you, I wish that in San Rafael, one of the Move to Men supporters is a fellow named Jonathan Freeman. And I want to lift up Jonathan because his very clever idea is, like, there's so many great political stunts that we can do to show how absurd this is. Here's one. Jonathan had this idea literally 15 years ago. He's been talking to him about it this long. He was driving his automobile in the high occupancy vehicle lane over and over again until he finally got pulled over and the officer wrote him a ticket and he said, "Look, there's only one person." And he said, "Oh no, officer, look. I have seat belted the corporate charter of the corporation now. There are two people." The officer was not impressed. Issued him a ticket. Jonathan fought it in court, made the legal argument, got on television. How many here knew that story, by the way, right? Hilarious, funny thing that showed how absurd that was. In Seattle, Washington, a Move to Men supporter got married to a corporate. Jonathan did not, but he won in the hearts and minds of the court of public opinion. The point I'm making is this. We need to use all the tools in the toolbox. We need to be creative and playful as well as deadly serious. I love your idea, both of them, And I think that I want to challenge all of you, let's start to think creatively, let's start to think artistically, let's start to push the boundaries of our own imagination about what we can do to build this movement. Who's number 4? Yes.
I thought it was 5. So I'd like to speak to education. I'm a special education teacher, but I'm a victim of the private school system. And what I'd like to say is we have to be careful about making our own schools. There's something that's happening, it's already happened, and it's been happening for a very long time, where we are not only making our own schools, we're making our own little group. And those groupings of people will now work together, and they'll hire each other, and then they'll give each other money, and that's been going on forever. So now, what do we do when we want to make our own schools, but not create this tight group that won't let anyone else in, and only creates a dogma that the small group of people will learn and won't be able to interact with other groups?
Okay. Thank you for the comment. I mean, I have to think about that. I do know this, that the most important thing that any human child learns is how to walk and how to talk. And sadly, in most educational facilities these days, the first thing they're taught is sit down and shut up. And so to me, I am less concerned as I am about, are we creating educational opportunities for children to become creative, critical thinkers, right? So you may disagree with me, that's okay.
No, it's
we
not
can
happening.
Yeah, I know. It's not happening, right? And so that's the point that I'm making is, and again, I ask for a round of applause for teachers. I absolutely thank and applaud teachers. Most teachers are actually doing their best, but the system is flawed, right? And the thing is, the system, politically, economically, socially, virtually every one of our systems are fundamentally flawed. So we've got to start rethinking everything. Now, I don't know exactly what it looks like. I'm not an educator, so I wouldn't pretend for one moment that I'm able to tell you what that policy looks like, but I definitely have some questions and some suggestions. That's all. Who's number 5, our last comment? Oh, Daniel.
So we're about saying we the people does not include corporations.
Yeah.
And our sisters and brothers in Latin America, following the lead of indigenous people there, are saying we the people does include folks other than human beings.
Correct.
They are giving legal standing to nature and natural systems like rivers and forests. And what I really like about that is they're taking the story, as we're saying, all right, the story is not corporations. They're saying the story is the web of life. That's what we the people really needs. And because those people can't vote, easy way, we have to shift from domination to stewardship. And that we're holding that in trust. So I just thought that was where the story's headed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that is where this story is headed, and I do think that we should lift up yet again that it's the global South where this story is way more advanced. And it's also interesting, we're specifically talking, about Evo Morales, who's an indigenous leader, right? Who was once jailed, is now the president, right? The first democratically enacted indigenous leader, right? That's kind of important. And we've seen 5 new constitutions actually come up and out of that process, including, by the way, in Iceland, where, John, you might appreciate this, they used the internet to actually create a public process to actually sort of vet and create an entire new national constitution. And you're right, Daniel, that in many of these constitutions that they are literally creating and codifying what was already part of indigenous knowledge, which is that nature has inherent and inalienable right to exist, and it's a web of life. And we've got to start pushing that. And I agree with you. Small conversation. I hope people will stick around. That's why the move to amendment, we're not saying it's the end-all and be-all. What we are saying is, and we don't say only humans have constitutional rights. We say artificial entities created under law do not have constitutional rights, because, Daniel, you may not be surprised that many of us who wrote that amendment are thinking exactly the way you are, and we want to leave that opening. We're not there yet as a movement, but I am very eager to help facilitate a process to get us there. I want to thank the local Move to Amend for coming out.
free community event this Saturday. The Green Party is having Luis Rodriguez, who is running for governor. He'll be speaking. It's free. The brothers Gajo are playing. Nicole Guerra is speaking also for, well, she's just a friend of the Andy Lopez family. Will be taking up a collection this Saturday at the Arlene Francis Center.
What time?
At 7:30.